I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network, and this is a breaking news alert. Although the January 6th committee may have held its last public hearing on October 13th of this month, their work is far from over. They've just completed reviewing over 1 million documents they received from the Secret Service, and we are now learning that they are arranging additional in-person depositions and interviews with Secret Service agents. Some Secret Service agents who they've previously deposed before, and they want to get more information, as well as some new Secret Service agents. High among the priorities of the January 6th committee after reviewing these additional records and taking additional testimony is getting the deposition testimony for the second time of former Secret Service Assistant Director Tony Ornato, who left the agency briefly to also serve as Trump's deputy chief of staff, as well as Trump's lead Secret Service agent on the day of the attack, Robert Engel. There's a number of other individuals that they are seeking deposition testimony of, according to a recent report by CNN, and this includes Kimberly Cheadle, the current Secret Service director who served as Assistant Director of Protective Operations on January 6th, Anthony Guglielmi, current Chief of Communications, appointed in March 2022. Guglielmi was not with the agency at the time of the Capitol attack, but has handled the agency's response to key developments in the committee's investigation, so their handling of the documents. We know, for example, that the Secret Service has asserted that all of their text message communications around January 6th and shortly thereafter had been deleted and destroyed when they migrated to a new server, which is completely unfathomable and appears to be in bad faith. But I'm sure the January 6th committee, now that they've read the million or so other documents, which are not the text messages, but this includes emails and other records, that they are laser focused now and have the information to ask additional questions about what happened to these records. You also have Timothy Goebbels, the head of former Vice President Mike Pence's detail, as well as at least one of the drivers who was part of Trump's motorcade on January 6th. And one of the things that Adam Kinzinger told CNN is that he believed that it was actually Tony Ornato who was one of the anonymous sources who tried to undermine the testimony of Cassidy Hutchinson, who was one of Mark Meadows' top aides when she testified before the January 6th committee and told the committee what she had heard, which was that Donald Trump tried to attack Secret Service agents in the SUV he was in when they refused to take him to the Capitol building during the insurrection. And also, Tony Ornato now appears may have not provided full and accurate information to the January 6th committee when they first questioned him. And so the January 6th committee needs to question him again now on additional information, and same things that goes with Engel. One of the things the January 6th committee is also focused on, and they brought this up during their last hearing on October 13th, is that the Secret Service had knowledge of clear and present threats to Vice President Pence and to lawmakers. There's text messages that were being exchanged that they were aware of, weapons that were at the ellipse and weapons being confiscated, and direct threats on Pence's life and lawmakers' life. Yet there was no briefing to Vice President Pence, apparently, by the Secret Service on these very specific and credible threats. As well, there was no specific briefings that were made to these lawmakers who had their lives threatened as well. Why is that the case? What happened there? Why didn't the Secret Service provide this briefing, which is what they should normally provide? And in one message that the Secret Service had, which came out during the October 3rd, January 6th committee hearing, there was a message that the Secret Service was aware of where someone said that Pence was, quote, a dead man walking if he doesn't do the right thing. Yet there was apparently no briefings to Pence on this and other threats. And so that's going to be a main focus of this questioning to these Secret Service agents. Another main focus of the questioning is going to be on Trump's a potential attack and assault on Secret Service agents, demanding that he take them to the Capitol building, comparing the testimony of Ornato in his previous deposition to what the facts are now. Also, the January 6th committee can ask Ornato if he is indeed a source of this misinformation out there to try to undermine Cassidy Hutchinson, when it was apparently known amongst other Secret Service agents and common water cooler talk, as it was called, that there were that this incident with Trump did in fact occur. So these are questions, of course, that Anthony Ornato is going to be asked about that incident as well. And then I think the January 6th committee also wants to drill down on the spoliation or the deletion and destruction issue of these text messages and other records. How could it possibly be, with all of the vital importance of standard document preservation protocols, that you would have a situation where these text message documents would be destroyed relating to January 6th. It is completely unfathomable unless there was bad faith motivations for the destruction, or in legal terms, we call that the spoliation of these records. But what this also shows is that the January 6th committee is still very hard at work. They are still investigating witnesses. They just, again, read 1 million additional records that they've received from the Secret Service. Let me read this statement for you by Adam Kinzinger that he had told CNN. Kinzinger said the following, quote, "I just think it's so important to keep in mind that through, quote, anonymous sources, which we believe to be actually Tony Ornato himself, he pushed back against Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony and said, it's just not true, and Tony will testify under oath." And then, of course, has not come in to testify under oath, which now he will be forced to testify under oath. We would expect the January 6th committee to prepare and to finalize their report by the end of this year, with all of the witness interviews that they've taken, with all of the public hearings that they've held. We will, of course, give you a very thorough breakdown here of the MeidasTouch Network when that report is prepared. But I think we all should give a great amount of gratitude to the hard work of the January 6th committee. Although there were people on the committee who you and I may or may not agree with some of their other politics, and I'm specifically talking about Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger on certain other issues. We can have disagreements about those other issues, but they did step up for our democracy. They did fight for our democracy when we needed them to. They continue to fight for our democracy and truly for our Constitution. And I think it is an impressive accomplishment that this committee was a bipartisan committee, that essentially all of the witnesses who were called and who spoke before the January 6th committee were not just Republicans, but were Trump advisors. I mean, I don't think there was any Democrat. I mean, there were the two potential individuals in Georgia who helped at one of the polling locations. But other than that, literally everyone was fairly high-ranking or very high-ranking officials in the Trump administration, whether they worked for Pence or Trump directly. That's who was deposed. And the January 6th committee did a great job by emphasizing and focusing on those individuals. One thing to point out also, though, the one thing that we didn't get from the January 6th committee is there were some questions that people like Pat Cipollone and Patrick Philbin and Mark Short and Greg Jacob were not able to answer to the January 6th committee relating to issues where Trump had asserted executive privilege. And even though the assertion of executive privilege, in my view, and I think in the court's view, is ultimately a frivolous assertion, it is a privilege being asserted. So given the timing of it, Pat Cipollone and Philbin and Short and Jacob, they couldn't testify on certain things. But in the Department of Justice's criminal investigation through the criminal grand jury process, which is being done in secret because grand juries are done in secret pre-indictment, and that's taking place in the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. The Department of Justice has prevailed with the federal judge who oversees the grand jury to reject the executive privilege claim with respect to Mark Short, former Vice President Pence's former Chief of Staff, and Greg Jacob, former Vice President Pence's former General Counsel. They've had to testify regarding issues where there were previous assertions of executive privilege. That just took place, but because grand juries, federal grand juries, most grand juries everywhere, are done in secret, we don't know what was said. The January 6th committee doesn't know what was said. That's just the way grand juries work. The Department of Justice has also filed motions to compel Pat Cipollone and Patrick Philbin to testify as well regarding issues that they previously claimed they couldn't based on assertions of executive privilege, arguing to the same federal judge who already ruled in their favor with respect to Short and Jacob that Cipollone and Philbin have to testify. And I think that the court will grant that as well. And so the Department of Justice is going to have some additional information. I know there actually is a bunch of press outlets that have filed, I think Politico is one of them, that have filed requests with the judge overseeing the grand jury to get transcripts and to get records. And whether or not that will be granted, it's hard to tell, but probably unlikely, because grand jury secrecy is always something that is highly guarded in all federal prosecutions. It would likely be upheld here, just the way it is, the way it's done. But nonetheless, it is information that we probably will have that the January 6th committee didn't have. So stay tuned there. We will keep you posted on the developments with the January 6th committee, what we learn about what comes out of these additional depositions of Secret Service agents, and what's taking place with the Department of Justice's parallel criminal investigation through the grand jury in Washington, D.C. We'll keep you posted. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hit the subscribe button right now. We're on our way to 1 million subscribers thanks to your support. So hit subscribe now. Also, we'd so appreciate your support at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Check us out there. There's lots of exclusive content when you become a member at patreon.com. So check out those membership tiers, some really cool stuff there. But most importantly, if you ask, how can you help us? That's one of the ways. Become a member at patreon.com. It goes a long way to help the work that we're doing here at the MeidasTouch Network. So please consider joining. Until next time, I'm Ben Meiselas.
MeidasTouch is unapologetically pro-democracy. And look, we know you are too. So please make sure you check out our best-selling shirt and our best-selling gear, the unapologetically pro-democracy gear. And hey, while you're at it, make sure you check out my favorite shirt and one of our most famous designs, It Wasn't Rigged, You're Just a Loser, at store.meidastouch.com. That's store.meidastouch.com.